Welcome to the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, the weekly show for nomads, work campers, RVers, and entrepreneurs looking to earn a living or build a business while enjoying the RV lifestyle. This week's host is Joshua Sheehan. Let's settle in and enjoy the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, brought to you by RV Life.
Welcome back to the podcast, entrepreneurs. Joshua here. This week we have Stephanie Puglisi on the podcast, and it's really cool. This is her third time on the RV Entrepreneur. She's the co-founder of the RVE Podcast and a co-author of 4 different books: RV Vacations, See You at the Campground, Where Should We Camp Next, and the new book that they're releasing, Where Should We Camp Next, National Parks Edition. She's pretty passionate about inspiring folks to have amazing camping, RVing, and road trip adventures. We talked about that a little bit in the episode of how, when the brand started out, RVing was a main focus, and now it's kind of morphing into the adventure, the experience, and RVing is just a method of getting to that. It's really cool to hear Stephanie's perspective and how, she is one of the original content creators in this space and how their progression and their journey has led to what it is today. And with that, I want to bring Stephanie on the podcast and jump into the interview. Well, Stephanie, welcome back to the RVE Entrepreneur Podcast. This is correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your third time on this podcast, correct?
That sounds about right, but goodness, I'm old because it feels like it's been a while.
It's back to, I think you guys were on episode 31. You and Jeremy were on with Heath and just talking about, content creation as it was just starting out. It's pretty impressive to see how you guys have evolved and grown since that first podcast through the second one, introducing your first book, and now having you back on to talk about your next project. So for folks who don't know who you are, give us a little rundown of who is Stephanie?
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned in the past that I've been on with my husband. So Jeremy is very much a part of my story as a content creator. So about probably 15 years ago or so now, we were married teachers who did some writing on the side, kind of that side hustle life that most educators out there will be very familiar with. And we started to do a little more of that writing on our adventures in the world of RVing with our newborn twin boys at the time. They are now teenagers, so we've had quite the journey over the last 13, 14, 15 years. So we started doing a lot of writing in the RV space. We started building sort of what I call a boutique media company, where we were creating RV content sort of before it was really so much of a thing as it is now. We worked with companies like Progressive and Cabela's and Jayco to really tell the story of what RVing meant to us as a family with young kids and how it had really changed the way that we interacted as a family at the time. And so fast forward, we ended up writing our first book, which was at the time called an Idiot's Guide book. There's no Idiot's Guide anymore, but at the time it was Idiot's Guide to RV Vacations. We actually just did a new edition of that for the publisher this past summer. So you'll be seeing that in the spring too. It's done fairly well, I guess, over the last, let's say, 6 or 7 years. So they want a new edition of it. So that'll be coming out this spring also. And then we went on to write 3 more books. The 4th book that we wrote together is coming out this spring. We're really excited about it. It's Where Should We Camp Next? National Parks. So we've made, a little career out of helping people have really great adventures in their RVs or at campgrounds, glamping, and any sort of really unique and fun accommodation that's out there.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the book, and then I want to jump back and more about the entrepreneurial journey that you guys have gone on. The book itself, is it a guidebook? Is it something I would pick up and then use to plan a vacation to national parks throughout the summer? What type of reader is this book going for?
Yeah, it's definitely, we like to use the word curated a lot, and it may feel a little overused, but I think it's really applicable, right, in this digital information age. So we know that there's a ton of information out there on national parks. Somebody wouldn't say, well, I just can't figure out what the national parks are and how to visit them, right? So why was this necessary? Well, we think that sometimes people have a hard time navigating, first of all, just what the best national parks are to visit as an RVer or a camper. We kind of took a little bit of a left turn, I guess you would say, on this book. Like, we did not do the standard national parks and do all of the camping opportunities in those national parks. What we actually did was look at all of the, I think it's like 500 plus NPS units. So that could be, the national park seashores, the national park monuments, historical sites. We looked across all of those and we looked for the ones that we felt were the best RVing or camping vacations. And we curated those into the book. So I don't even know how many we actually wound up with. I'd have to probably ask our publisher, what was the final count? And I think we had to cut some out at the end because we were way over word count. But I mean, you'll find a Civil War National Park tour. So that encompasses quite a few of the national park units around Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, that area. And then we divided it further up into the camping opportunities that were in the parks and outside of the parks. So that's another thing that people, I think, get overwhelmed with. There's a lot of people out there that want to tell you what the best way to camp is. And we kind of never want to tell anybody that. That's sort of part of our ethos as content creators. I really want to help everybody have the best kind of experience for their tastes, which may be different than mine, and that's okay. So, for example, some people might really want that rustic inside the park, no hookups. You can't even make reservations, right? You have to be there at the crack of dawn and try to jet into the, national park campground as somebody's leaving. Some people may really thrive on that experience. And for others, that kind of experience might give them high blood pressure. And that's okay, right? And so instead, we wanted to give them the places maybe outside of the park. It comes to mind some amazing resorts outside of national parks, like the West Glacier KOA is a famous one, right? That people just go to and their jaws drop at how beautiful this is, with the heated pools and the restaurant and the live music and the ice cream shop, right there on site. And that's okay too. So this book is centered around the national park unit and then giving people amazing camping opportunities inside the park and then amazing camping opportunities outside the park, and telling them what each is going to have for them. And hopefully they'll find something that works for their own personal camping style.
So with over 500 NPS units,
yeah,
how do you even begin to break down what you're going? Because there's not even it would take years to visit all those independently. And also with the mindset of analyzing them to make content, to make a book, right? Not just visiting and experiencing as your family, but also thinking about what other type of users would enjoy this. How can I present this that might be, I don't like this, but Joe next to me really does like this aspect. How do you, as a content creator and an author, go about breaking down such a vast number of units, but also vast distances, right? Like you guys live on the East Coast.
Yeah.
How do you even decide what places you're going to intentionally visit, what places you're going to research and get other people's opinions on, to be able to distill it down into a compact, readable book that's not an encyclopedia?
Yeah, well, let me be clear. We did not visit all 500 and something of them to make that decision. We started by looking at we had like these big spreadsheets that had basic regional, right? Diversity, first of all, because we know that anybody that picks up this book will want a representation from all of the different areas of the country. This wasn't a 50-state book. Like our last book, Where Should We Camp Next, was a 50-state guide. This was different, but we still wanted to make sure that no matter what area of the country people were exploring, that there would be a bunch of different options for them. So I think that was probably the very first thing that we looked at. Then we went in and we filled in the biggies, right? Like, okay, nobody wants a Where Should We Camp Next national parks book that does not have a mention of the Grand Canyon in it, right? Or Yellowstone or Glacier. So we really then plugged in what those biggies were that we just knew we had to include in our book. And then we wanted to include in our book too, because those have been some of, the most awe-inspiring experiences for our family, and we wouldn't want to leave them out. There's a reason why everybody visits Yellowstone, right? It's amazing and you should go. So we filled those in. And then what we did was we looked for areas. A lot of areas in this country are actually underrepresented with official NPS sites.
Mm-hmm.
We live in one of these areas that you mentioned where we are on the East Coast. Funny enough, we have to drive like 10 hours up to Acadia National Park, or 6 hours south to Shenandoah, or about, let's say, 12 hours to the Smokies, right, from where we are in New Jersey. But we're also surrounded by some really great national park sites, NPS sites, like the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people don't know that they can camp when they visit Ellis Island, right? Either a little bit outside at a more rustic campground, or they could camp right in Jersey City, New Jersey, and take the boat right over to Ellis Island. So we kind of wanted a mix of those standard type of vacations that everybody would expect, with also really fun, unique discoveries for folks. And you'll see a lot of our personality probably comes through. I would say we're beach people, born and raised on the beach. Even though we love the mountains, we love national seashores. And so even when we travel, we really do gravitate towards some of those national seashore experiences. So maybe you'll find more of those in the book than you might if somebody else had written it.
So being that this is a second installment of a previous,
Yeah.
you've got your first book, this is a second in a kind of a series, I guess. Was that liberating or restrictive, having to follow a similar format so that people knew what they were expecting with the second book?
That's a great question. I think it was really a fun experience, because the reason obviously why our publisher asked for this was we're very happy that the first Where Should We Camp Next book has done extraordinarily well. And what we were able to do because of that was look at what people said they loved about it, and then also what they said they wished was different about it. And that was really helpful to us. So one of the things that, one of, I would say, the top complaints about Where Should We Camp Next was the number of campground reviews in it, right? And we were like, well, yeah, when you write a book about 50 states, you only get a certain word count per state, right? And it was really challenging to keep our word count down and also to provide a great range of campgrounds in every state. So we really had to pick and choose and limit it. A 50-state guide is just going to be like that. But what we realized was over and over again, people just wanted more campgrounds. So with the National Park book, we really tried to say, okay, we're going to keep our word count down, maybe in the campground descriptions, right? In some of the extra stuff. Our publisher was like, you can't get rid of all the extra stuff because people love it. Apparently, people really gave a lot of feedback about all of our tips and tricks, sidebars that are throughout the books, which we can talk more about if you want. But really like those recommendations for local special things to do, and tips on like maybe hiking with kids, or what kind of bug spray, to bring to this particular place. They were like, don't get rid of all that because people really love it. And it's your own unique brand, right? Like that's what we do, is we help people just have really great experiences. But we worked to really expand the number of campgrounds at the extent sometimes of limiting the number of national park sites, right, that we covered. So it was like, okay, that inside the park, outside the park, and having a real range of hookups, not hookups, resort, boondocking. So it was really fun because we felt like we were able to do something that we knew people would respond to and love. And the brand has become like another member of our family. The Where Should We Camp Next brand has sort of taken root and, developed its own personality. So I would say definitely liberating.
So you talk about the brand kind of becoming part of the family. I found you guys back when we had a pop-up camper. I remember listening to a podcast and you were so excited about finding your red Jayco pop-up. You guys had just gotten that, and it was a treasure hunt to find it because they were not as common as the blue and teal ones. It was really cool to hear. And so, your podcast being a part of that family, and now the book series, how do you guys do all that you do? Because every time I turn around, it seems like you and Jeremy are putting out another project, working with another company, adding another book to the stable. What does a normal week look like for you guys, and how are you how are you attempting to balance that drive to create? Because people who just want to go to a 9-to-5 job don't work to create books and blogs and podcasts, because you have to have a passion for it, with exploring these places by yourself and getting into, getting out to explore the places that you're encouraging people to go to, and also experiences for your kids and showing the importance of family time?
It's a circus around here. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure you get the reaction. Maybe other guests on your show laugh too. I don't know when you ask about how they balance it all, right? Because it doesn't really feel like we do a great job. But we've been doing this a while now. And so, yes, we have learned a lot of lessons. I would say the first lesson is that we've learned that anything that we do has to be sustainable, very much apart from our children. So we started this when they were very young. And I'm assuming your audience that's listening is very interested in the business nitty gritty. So I'm going to get a little bit, into that and a little less like aspirational, inspirational kind of thing. So we started this when our kids were very young. I mean, they were babies, and it was so invigorating for us to have these experiences. And like you mentioned, creative outlet, right? Jeremy and I are both creatives. So parenting, especially young children, can feel like such a drain. What are you doing all day? You're feeding and diapering and you're not sleeping. And that creative juice can really just feel like it's out, of you permanently. You'll never get it back. But what we were doing was actually helping us really enjoy the experience of parenting them. And, we just had these amazing adventures. Sometimes I look back on it and I'm like, we were nuts because of what we did with, our third came along and he was in the camper at 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
And we had so much fun with that. But at the same time, their lives started to become more of what they wanted their lives to look like. One of the things that was very important to us always, the reason why we did this, not was because we wanted our kids to always love RVing or always love camping or wanted them to be around us 24/7, right? I wanted my kids to see the world and to have bigger imaginations and to have more intentionality themselves, right? About what they wanted in life, and that they weren't just looking and accepting whatever all the other kids in their class were doing or all the other kids in their school were doing. So part of the reason why we did what we did was really to help raise more well-rounded, creative, interesting kids. And so I think we've accomplished that, and they do what they want to do, and it doesn't always necessarily line up with what's easiest for the business. If it's easier for us to spend more time on the road or et cetera. So it's all a balance, and we really respect them and what they want in life. And we know that we have to build a healthy business that adjusts to those various chapters of our life as a family. They love sports. And that's been a challenge for us because it just puts a lot of demands on the schedule. Mm-hmm. And part of building this healthy business has been creating revenue streams that are more responsive to those demands on our schedule and less needing for us to be in a lot of different locations all the time, spending a lot of time on the road. So the books are a part of that, right? We can do more intensive research, recon, traveling in and out. Jeremy is working very hard on the next book in this series. I will not say what it is, but the next book in the series is already underway. Over the winter, that may look like him literally going away from the house for 3 or 4 days to hit up like 10, 11, 12 different places that he wants to see, right? Like in person, he wants to take a look at, wants to be able to describe better. But I stay home and shuttle kids to various basketball practices and wrestling matches. And that's okay for us. It really works for us where we are right now.
That makes total sense. If you were to ballpark a number, how many revenue streams do you guys currently have?
Okay. So I'm not sure if your audience knows this about me, but I actually accepted a 9-to-5, a unique 9-to-5 about 3 years ago. So I became the head of content for Road Pass Digital. So that oversees the brands of Road Trippers, which your audience may be familiar with, Campendium, Our Village. So what I do is in my day-to-day job, my 9-to-5 job, I actually oversee all of the content, all of the media that you'll see in-app and on the web for all of those different brands. So that's been a really exciting job for me, but it's also been very demanding of my time, obviously. And so that's one, I would call that a revenue stream, right? My day-to-day job. When I went to do that, Jeremy took over what we call the podcast network brand, right? The RV Atlas full time. So we kind of bifurcated our responsibilities a bit that way. And he really took over managing the podcast, which is a very important revenue stream for us. So we do sell advertising on the podcast. And then also we bundle that with other client work. Like you said, you're seeing, us do work for different clients. We look for a small amount of clients that have a lot of really great relevance for our audience. And we know that, this is like our marker of how we accept a contract or not. It's like, would we tell somebody about this brand or one of their products around the campfire, right? To a friend that we were sitting at with the campground and we would say, oh, we just got these snap pads or RV lock, or, I'm just off the head thinking of these little things that have made a big difference for our enjoyment of our RV over the years. And you would say, okay, like I would naturally recommend these products. We use these products in our everyday life and in our RVing and camping life. So we'll build a bigger relationship with this brand. That'll usually include podcast advertising and then also other kinds of content creation. So that's like on our platform, right? So that would be another revenue stream. It would be like, okay, you get to advertise on our platform. We might make some reels for you. We might do a blog post review of how we've used this product, et cetera, et cetera. Then another revenue stream would be the content that we create for other brands on their platforms. This is really how we built our brand. And honestly, it's tricky to turn that off, right? That stream off. But I would say to anybody who's getting started, it's a hustle, to do that. I mean, we do a lot of it because we have these clients that we've worked with for years. And, we really love working with them. We bring something to the table. We reach people through doing this. We think it's important. Jeremy does a YouTube series with Go RVing would be an example of this. He's done for 2 years, really extensive YouTube series with them, and they've done fantastic for Go RVing, and he really enjoys doing them. So he's going to continue doing them. So that's a whole nother revenue stream. And then we have our publications. So this was something that is a slow burn. As anybody knows, you don't write a book as part of a get-rich-quick scheme.
Sure.
So now we're on to 4 books. Well, it'll be 4 books published in April, I think when this show's coming out and when the actual book is released in April of 2023. So we'll have 4 books out. We have more in the works. And it's a slow burn, right? That's like, I think they call it that snowball, right? Effect. So the more you have, the better they do, the more that really does become almost the closest thing. I hate the term passive income because I don't really think,
I like residual income.
Okay. Yeah, we can go for that. So this is more of that residual income factor where the work that we put in over time, we get paid back for that fairly quickly, right? Like in those initial sales and everything, you make sort of what would be your time and labor kind of a price. And then, with every 6-month check that you get, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't have to do more work for that besides, just making sure that you're marketing your stuff all the time and everything. So I don't know how many streams was that? Was that 4 or 5?
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you were, well, let me first say this. I totally agree. I dislike the word passive income because it implies that it's passive, that you didn't do any work. Well, no, I just preloaded a bunch of the work and then it's still maintaining going on. There's really is not a whole lot of passive income streams available in the world. I definitely like residual better because you're right. You write the book and then the check comes in as long as all of the processes are in place for it to continue getting out there.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you were to start all over tomorrow, say all of this stuff was gone, but you still want to do content creation, what might you do differently? Or what would you do if you had to start over from zero tomorrow?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a tricky question to answer because you really wonder how many of those initial mistakes were really necessary, right?
Say you know what you know now.
Yeah. So I think that the answer to this, I think Jeremy and I would both really agree that the investment angle, we would have been more willing to invest in the things that we were not immediately paid for in order to give us a little more freedom in the long run.
Can you give me an example?
Absolutely. So we started out actually very early on working with clients. That was how, we didn't set out to make a business. And, some people getting into this now, it might be hard for them to imagine how different everything was just 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That was before that. I don't think that anybody would ever use the phrase influencer at that time.
No.
So there really just wasn't this digital landscape, right? There weren't things like people weren't saying, oh, make a digital download and build an email list. And none of that stuff existed when we first started getting approached by clients. I'll never forget, at first you think you're getting punked when people from Progressive Insurance are calling you.
Right.
And saying, hey, we just found your stuff. We love it. Will you write all of our RV content for us? You're like, what? Progressive Insurance? Like, why are you calling me? We were lucky enough to work with some of the biggest brands in the outdoor space very early on because, they would look all over the internet. They would see somebody who knew how to write and who knew how to communicate to people. And they would say, well, we want those people to do our stuff, right? It sounds so much better than this agency that we hired, right? To create this marketing stuff. So our business was born probably doing the wrong thing because we were making content for other people's platforms. And very quickly, the world would start rewarding people who built their own platforms, right? And that really wasn't happening at that time. So we didn't know. And if we could have been in front of that, probably we could have built up we could have spent more time investing in our own platforms as opposed to constantly giving really amazing, wonderful, authentic, connecting content to large brands, right? And once you give that away, you can't get it back, right? It lives on their platform forever. Why were we doing that? Well, we had young kids, we had to pay the bills, right? I really respect everybody who doesn't just have the liberty to just be like, I don't need to make money right now, right? We always did. We had bills to pay. We had kids to raise. So, the money was good compared to our teaching salaries, and we did that. And we were so busy doing that it was very difficult for us to find time to ever invest in all the stuff that all of the other people that then, 5 years, 6 years later, when influencers are a thing, they're all out there building their own brands. And we were really more of a agency in a way, right? It was a boutique agency, but we were building the agency. It took us a long time to say, we have to find the time to write our own book. I'll never forget, we wrote The Idiot's Guide to RV Vacations. They found us, they asked us to write that book. We never had to look for that book contract. So what happened was after that, we said to our editor who loved working with us, and she was like, oh, you guys were amazing. We said, well, do you want to hook us up with some people that can help us do this again? Like, we really didn't, like, you just found us. We didn't have to sell ourselves, She connected us with her favorite agent. Now, this is somebody who was working in the publishing world at DK for decades. And she was like, this is my favorite agent. I love her. I'm going to introduce you. That's Marilyn Allen is our agent now. That was her. So we had a meeting with Marilyn Allen. And she was like, I want to be your guys' agent. You have a million good ideas. You have your next book. This is amazing. Here's the contract. We signed the contract with her. Poor Marilyn did not get a book proposal from us I wish Jeremy was here to keep me honest, because it may have been 2 years. We were so busy.
Wow.
That we had an agent, we had a book, we had everybody ready to find our next book contract, and we could not do it. We just couldn't find the time to do it. I wrote her a very embarrassed email. I think it was like 1.5 to 2 years. It could have been 3 years. I don't know. It was so long. I wrote her a very embarrassed email. And I said, hi, I don't know if you remember us. Like, you signed on to be our agent a few years ago and we never did anything. Like, we're interested in really making this happen now. She was like, oh, no, she was like, oh,
She's like, yeah, right.
knew, when the time was right, I'm here. Let's do this. We just locked ourselves in a room. It was that kind of a thing. Like, we have to do the book proposal. We did it with her. Within a month, we had our next book contract,
And I'm sure you were like, why didn't we just knock this out?
Right.
Yeah.
You realize that if you had just stopped the noise, stopped taking every offer that came along. I know in the beginning, it's so hard to say no because gosh, how blessed are you that people are reaching out and saying, will you do this? Will you do that? Right. It feels like as soon as you start saying no, you're kind of taunting the universe. You know what I mean? Like, who are you to not say yes to this opportunity? Maybe the opportunities will go away. Right. Like that's, I think, probably a common psychology with folks that kind of venture into this entrepreneurial space. So it was really hard for us to say no to other people and say yes to our own, and I would say our own proven content, right? It wasn't like we didn't know that we could do this well. We did. We had been paid for years and years to do it. And our content did really great on other people's channels. And our content on our podcast was always doing great, right? Like our podcast has always, even in spite of our lack of, we just don't do all the things that all of these digital entrepreneurs do. We're very lackadaisical about our social media. We don't care that much about it. We don't send emails to anybody. Like all of the stuff that everybody does, we don't do. We're better at sort of digging in and creating like long form, more lasting content. It just works better for us.
So your personal brand started out as RV Family Travel Atlas.
Yeah. Do you want to know the story behind that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is, again, I feel like I am like the old lady on the podcast today. When we started this podcast, I think Jeremy said we're going to be in year 10 next year. I think he told me. And I was like blown away by that. But this was, again, before podcasts were something that everybody had. So like 9 years ago, I podcast through my educational background. So I was actually an Apple educator. So I trained other teachers on how to use Apple technology in the classroom. So I use GarageBand with my students a lot to help them do these creative projects, blah, blah, blah. I said, Jeremy, this is what we're going to do. We need to do this. This is a differentiator. I love doing this with my kids, my students. This is what I want to do. I'd always loved radio, right? I'd always loved NPR and like This American Life, right? And that audio storytelling. So I said, let's do this. So we sat down like 9 years ago and we decided to do this podcast. At the time, if you were in Apple Podcasts, iTunes, right at the time, there was no Apple Podcast. There was no like real SEO. So if someone was looking for an RV podcast, it wasn't like they could type in RV and Apple would serve them up like a RV podcast that didn't have RV in the name. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You actually had to have RV in your name to show up when somebody was searching for an RV podcast.
Right.
Guess what else you had to have in your name? So I was like, if somebody's searching for family travel,
right,
you actually had to have that in your name in order to show up in their search. So at the time I was like, okay, well, how are we going to do this so that people find us, our niche, right? And I was like, okay, well, we have to have RV and then we have to have family travel because that was a huge differentiator for us. Because at the time there was only one other RV podcast really, and it was much more geared towards retirees.
Right.
Then it was like, okay, well, what's the creative side of the name? Okay, Atlas, right? Like it's like, exploring. So that was where that name came from. It was me trying to figure out how we were going to show up in Apple Podcasts. So there you go. That's what happens when you build a podcast 10 years ago.
Now, I really like with your podcast how you've got the format of putting things out pretty much during the camping season and then taking the winter season off, kind of making it a seasonal podcast that gives you time to then work on your books, go do research, get ahead of the game a little bit. At what point did you guys start out that way, or was it all year and then you moved to a seasonal schedule?
Yeah, so we started off all year. And we would always have to do everything ahead of time if we were going to take anything off. And we did that for years. That was backbreaking.
Yeah.
It was really challenging. Then what I did was, at the time, Jeremy was still teaching and I ran the business full time. And I said, okay, well, we've got to figure this out. Why don't we do like 3 seasons? And I said, we'll take off a month, like our slowest, looking at the numbers and the metrics. I said, oh, well, we'll take off January. And we also, a big stream of revenue for us was RV shows pre-COVID. So our winters were bonkers because we would be going all over the country doing RV show seminars.
Seminars. Okay.
Yes, seminars. So we worked with Good Sam and we'd go all over the country. So we'd be gone. One of us would be gone almost every single weekend in the winter. So I said, okay, we'll take off January. I think it was like January, May, and September. And 3 seasons. I was like, this will be great. It'll give us some of that time that we don't have to do other things, blah, blah, blah. So then, of course, this is an example of the lesson that I talked about, but that we apparently never learned. We always were sold out of advertising. And people, really qualified partners, would come to us and would be like, we'd like to buy advertising. We'd be like, we have no more room. So then, having gone to a season structure, I said, well, why don't we have mini episodes during the months off? And we can sell those, because we would have people that wanted to advertise. And again, we had no idea how to say no. So then we started to do these mini seasons. So January, the idea was it would be off, but it was never off. January became the mini season. And I would sell it to one of these people that want it. And it would be 4 little mini episodes that were more thematically oriented, maybe around like RV shopping or whatever, May, the same thing. September, the same thing. So it was a pipe dream. It quickly went awry. And then when I took the job that I have now as the VP of content for Road Pass, it was abundantly clear that we actually had to say no to things, right? Like I didn't have as much time to give, and Jeremy needed to be more independent in a lot of that stuff. So that was the time when those little mini seasons did finally drop off. We went more to a seasonal structure. He's experimented with a few different things. This is the first year that he took off for the entire, we closed down podcast shop in the fall, and he's not reopening it until I think it's like in 2 weeks. It'll kick back in. And that's the first time we've done that. And I'll be honest, it feels a little weird and scary. And also you just feel like we're so used to serving our audience. And it feels like you're not serving them. So that's hard because people are like, I miss, having my podcast to listen to. We'll see if we revisit how he wants to do that going forward. But yeah, the reason why we did that was because we're writing books now, and we know how much it takes. We're writing our 5th one right now. We know the kind of strain it puts on us. We know the amount of focus it takes to really do these well. And we want to make space for that in our lives and not just always be burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, no, I think it makes total sense. I mean, there's a reason that movies come out in installments and TV shows have seasons, that you can put out better content when you take breaks and you get re-energized and work on other things and come back to it. Because I think, as you mentioned, if you just continue pushing through just because I have to do something this week, this month, it gets monotonous, and that's how people burn out for sure. So now RV Atlas and your personal brand is getting bigger. 2-part question, I guess.
Okay.
What does it look like in the future? What are you guys growing into? Where are you looking towards the horizon? And 2, have you guys talked about, and I guess is there an answer to it, of does it ever involve more than just Jeremy and Stephanie?
Well, it does. I would say, so 2-part question. We'll start with the first one. Where does it go in the future? I think it is important to both of us to always be evolving and growing and learning and changing as people, right? And we've been doing this for a long time now, and you're not the same person with the same interests and, as you were 10 years ago. If you are, there's something wrong, right? Maybe you haven't been paying enough attention as you've been traveling, right? If you're the exact same person. So I think that there's a really easy answer to that question as a brand. Something that we've learned is that the RV, even though it was incredibly central to us discovering a lot of this, I would call magic in our lives, kismet in our lives, it's not the main character. So I felt like there was this pressure from like, I don't even know, like maybe the other creator space and everything. Like you have to like act like the RV is the main character. It's not, right? Like we're the main characters.
Sure.
And I won't let the cat out of the bag. Like we do have we haven't even done a podcast on it. We can't even find the time to get in front of a microphone for our own podcast.
Well, thank you for being here today.
So there is a podcast that will come out soon that will share with everybody. Like we have a new RV. RVing will always be a central part of what we enjoy doing, but it's not the main character. And we really have learned over the years that like, I'll never forget being at an under canvas outside of Yellowstone a couple of years ago. My one son never stops talking about that under canvas and sitting outside and looking at the stars, right? We did not need an RV for that experience. There's other amazing things, to explore out there. And I think that we've noticed that people kind of want that variety and they might love their RV, but also want to try other things. And so we've really been dedicated in our books also to helping people explore a variety of different travel experiences. Like, yes, camping, RVing, but also glamping, unique. In our book titles, it says unique outdoor accommodations. Mm-hmm. And I think that you'll see our brand cover, we've done it in the past without necessarily acknowledging it, you know what I mean? But you'll see more of that from our brand going forward because we really see that it's what actually people want and how most of our audience is traveling. They're not one-trick ponies that way. So I think that you're going to see more of that from our brand in the future. One thing that we know is that people love our campground content more, like even more so than the rig content or a lot of other stuff. So that's, we really want to kind of dig into what people are asking for more of instead of trying to be, cover everything about the RVing lifestyle. So I think that you're going to see a lot more of maybe more aligning of our other content to what you see works so well from the books that we've been publishing. Mm-hmm. But there was a second part to the question. What did I miss?
Just that as it's growing and it's becoming a bigger thing, the two of you only have so much time of growing your team and growing the brand into something that more than two people can handle.
Yeah, that's a good question. Not something that we've ever been good at, but I do want to say that other people have always been a part of the success of the RV Atlas over the years. We have correspondents, so we just always called them correspondents, that are still on our show, that have been coming on our show for 8 years. Mm-hmm. People, struggle. They do think that everything that's on the platform is like Jeremy and Stephanie centric, but it's actually not. Like we very early on did not want people to only hear things we liked right. or ways that we traveled. Or so from early on, we were bringing in people from all over the country, a fam with a van, Lauren, with her class B in California. We have Midwest correspondents. Carrie Cox has been on, Travels with Birdie has been on for 8-9 years, doing a lot of that Midwestern stuff. Texas, Colorado, just people from all over the country sharing that more realistic way of camping and RVing with, either themselves or their families or friends. Because, it's not all about huge epic trips. It's also just about those weekend trips to those state parks in Colorado, maybe, that we wouldn't be able to cover if we were only, doing what we personally did. So I know that it's important to us to always be expanding those voices on our platforms. In terms of expanding our team, we are terrible you shouldn't even have me on the show. We're terrible entrepreneurs. We are the
track record suggests otherwise.
No, we're terrible at this stuff where people do, I am not kidding you. I was saying to Jeremy the other day, I'm going to make you get a bookkeeper. We do not have that. I have done our P&L sheets. guests, since day one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another lesson for other people. Like, listen to other people, not me, on that kind of stuff. Like, do get people that are experts in their areas to take some stuff off your plate, because I think we haven't been very good at that. We're recalibrating. We've had a really, really busy few years, and we're in one of those. I'm sure that most people listening that have built businesses understand you kind of go through this cycle where you build, and then you recalibrate and you try to find some like equilibrium, and then you like build the next stage. Right now, we're definitely in one of those periods where, okay, we got through the COVID year. You know what I mean? Like, we'd had 3 kids and, just wacky world stuff. And you're like, okay, what got out of whack? How do we want to change some things? What do we want to focus on? We're definitely in one of those recalibrations, especially with the books having done so well and being more of the focus of the business going forward. So it does need to include us, honestly, not expanding the team in terms of RV and camping experts, because we have so many of them and they're so wonderful. We've done a bad job at expanding the team of people who have more of the skills and the tasks to help take things off of our plate as small business owners.
I hear that. And it's hard, right? Because, you want to be controlling it and have your hands in it and know intimate details. And at the same time, that stuff takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, it does. And I mean, even networking with people, in this kind of a community is so helpful for that too. Like, we have the people who we put no time and effort. Like I said, we do very poor at our own platforms. So we haven't had any time and effort like into our website really over the past few years. But actually our website hosts and our initial designers, we met through Heath, and they're still there supporting us, and they're ready to go with another project. Like, they're there for us whenever we go, okay, we're ready to put some time into this again, because we know we've ignored it for too long. They're there, and it's a real relationship. It's not just somebody that you found on Fiverr or, know, and that's been incredibly important, I think, for this journey too, is the people that we work with are more than just business relationships.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. Well, Stephanie, I want to be respectful of your time. Congratulations on the 4th book. Go ahead and give us a rundown of where we can check all the things that you guys are doing out online and where folks can connect with you if they're interested in learning more.
Yeah, so we are the RV Atlas. So it's the RVatlas.com. You can find the RV Atlas podcast in wherever you listen to your podcasts in. The new book is Where Should We Camp Next? National Parks. The one before that is Where Should We Camp Next? They're all available at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or your local bookseller. We really love it if you support your local independent bookseller. And they've been phenomenal in really helping us to showcase this book in communities across the United States. So that's been great. So yeah, pick up a copy. They're very giftable. If you read the reviews of the books, it seems like a lot of people gift this, right, to the people in their lives that they know want to get out there, want to explore more, want to visit the campground more. So it's apparently giftable. So pick them up for your next present, housewarming, rig warming present for somebody.
Awesome. Cool. I will make sure to put all those links into the show notes as well. Stephanie, thank you again for taking the time to be on the RV Entrepreneur.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was really nice to be back. Let's not wait. I don't know. What was it? Is it 5 years? How long has it been? I don't want to feel so old the next time I come on.
We'll try and make you feel young again. Don't worry.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
Well, there you go. There was an interview with Stephanie Puglisi, author of Where Should We Camp Next? National Parks, co-author with her husband, Jeremy. It's exciting to hear the progression of how they started out as something that was just a side hustle, creative outlet for them. And it has morphed into something of multiple revenue streams, different opportunities that present itself, and a good problem to have of having more work than you have time for. So it's really been interesting to watch them. Personally, I've watched them and listened to their podcast and gone along with some of their endeavors throughout the years. To get on the podcast and talk about some of those different things with Stephanie directly was really cool to just get a peek behind the curtain and learn a little bit about the insight of their journey and their entrepreneurial endeavors throughout the years. If you want to check out the book, I'll make sure to put the links to that in the show notes, and also all the links to the RV Entrepreneur Facebook group, email list, all that will be in the show notes as well. Until next time, I'll see you down the road.